That Wednesday afternoon will haunt me forever. I'm sitting in my car right now, in the parking lot of what used to be my workplace, holding a cardboard box with 3 years of my professional life reduced to a coffee mug and a dying plant. My hands are still shaking from what just happened in there. I trusted Jennifer completely. I shared everything with her, every client detail, every project strategy, every vulnerable moment when I felt overwhelmed. I thought we were partners. I thought she cared about my success the way I cared about hers. Jennifer took my transparency and turned it into a weapon. She documented every conversation where I expressed frustration or uncertainty, twisted my honesty into evidence of incompetence, and presented it all to management like she was some kind of concerned whistleblower. She didn't just stab me in the back. She made me hand her the knife and show her exactly where to aim it. The betrayal cut so deep because I helped her destroy me, one shared secret at a time. Right now, I feel like the biggest fool who ever walked into an office building. My chest feels tight, like I can't get enough air. I keep replaying every moment, every email I copied her on, every process I explained in detail, every time I trusted her with information that she'd later use to paint me as disorganized and unreliable. The humiliation burns worse than the job loss. They escorted me out like I was some kind of criminal, past colleagues who wouldn't even make eye contact, carrying my pathetic little box of belongings. But what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, workplace politics, and the price of being too trusting in a world where some people see kindness as weakness. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was. From day one at Henderson Marketing, I trusted Jennifer completely. Every single change in our project, every client adjustment, every team detail, I shared it all with her. I never held back anything. I thought that was respect, you know? Partnership. The kind of professional relationship you build your career on. I'd sit in my cramped cubicle next to the coffee machine, and whenever something came up, my first instinct was to loop her in. "Hey, John, just wanted you to know the Morrison client wants to push the deadline back 2 weeks." It felt natural, like breathing. The habit of copying her on every email became second nature to me. Since we started working together in early 2021, anything I decided, I included her. Sometimes it wasn't even necessary, but I did it anyway, because I wanted her to feel like she was part of the process, that she mattered to me, professionally speaking. I'd be typing up a quick response to our boss about budget allocations, and I'd automatically add Jennifer's email to the CC line. My fingers would move without thinking. It was like including your best friend in weekend plans. You just do it because that's what partners do. Even those mundane Tuesday morning updates about supply orders or the quarterly review schedules. She was always there in my inbox threads. The trust ran so deep that I'd share even what made me vulnerable. There were days when I'd completely break down to her. Days when the Morrison client would call me at 7 in the morning, screaming about deliverables that weren't even due yet. Days when I felt like I was drowning in deadlines and impossible expectations. And Jennifer would listen, really listen, in that little break room with the flickering fluorescent light and the vending machine that ate your quarters. "You handle everything with such dignity," she'd tell me, her voice soft and reassuring. "I don't know how you do it, but you never let them see you sweat." I believed those words for months. They became my anchor during the worst storms. When she'd text me outside business hours asking for explanations, I never hesitated. Even after 8 p.m., when I was home in my tiny apartment, heating up leftover Chinese takeout and watching Netflix, if Jennifer's name popped up on my phone, I'd respond immediately. "Hey, can you walk me through the Peterson campaign timeline again?" And I would. I'd forward emails, re-explain strategies, send over project histories. I thought it showed how dedicated we both were to getting things right, how we were building something solid together, the kind of professional trust that makes careers flourish. My roommate would roll her eyes sometimes, seeing me typing away on my phone while our show played in the background. What I didn't realize then was how carefully she was cataloging every piece of information I shared. Every vulnerability I revealed, every process I explained, every client detail I trusted her with. She was filing it all away like evidence in some case I didn't know was being built against me. Those late-night text exchanges weren't about partnership or dedication. They were about control disguised as genuine interest. She was learning my methods, my client relationships, my decision-making process, not to support me, but to eventually replace me. The trust I thought we were building was actually the rope she'd use to hang me with later. I remember this one particular evening in September, after a brutal day dealing with the Patterson account. The client had rejected our third round of concepts, and I was sitting in my Honda Civic in the parking lot, too exhausted to drive home yet. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "That meeting looked rough. You okay?" I actually teared up a little, grateful that someone had noticed, that someone cared enough to check on me. I typed back a long message about feeling overwhelmed, about questioning whether I was cut out for this business, about the pressure eating away at my confidence. She responded with heart emojis and encouraging words. But now I understand. She wasn't checking on my well-being. She was measuring my weakness. The pattern continued for months. This dance of trust that I thought was mutual, but was actually completely one-sided. Every morning I'd grab my coffee from the gas station across from our office building, and I'd think about what updates to share with Jennifer that day. What wins to celebrate together? What challenges to tackle as a team? I built my entire professional routine around including her, keeping her informed, making her feel valued. It never occurred to me to question why she needed to know so much about everything I did. Why she asked so many detailed questions about my processes. Why she wanted copies of documents that weren't really her responsibility. Trust, I've learned, can make you blind to the most obvious red flags when they're wrapped in the right kind of smile. She started changing, and I felt it in my gut. But I did what I always do. I pushed down that intuition, rationalized it away, told myself it was just my imagination, that she was stressed, that work was getting to her like it was getting to me, that something deeper was shifting, something I should have paid attention to. You know that feeling when someone you trust starts acting different? It's subtle at first, like when your favorite restaurant changes their recipe just slightly. You can taste it, but you tell yourself it's the same. That's exactly what was happening with Jennifer, except I was too loyal to see it clearly. The meeting she forgot to invite me to was the first real crack in my rose-colored glasses. It was a quarterly review session with department heads, something she'd always included me in before. We'd prep together, share notes, strategize on how to present our project updates. This time, nothing. I found out by accident when I saw our colleague Derek posting on LinkedIn about productive strategy sessions. My stomach dropped when I read his post. When I casually asked Jennifer about it later, stirring my coffee in that same break room where she used to comfort me, she barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, that? It was super last minute. Like, they literally called me 10 minutes before." But Derek's post was timestamped from the morning, with a photo of a conference room that looked anything but hastily arranged. Then came the comment that should have been my wake-up call. We were in the main office area, near the printer that was always jamming, and I was explaining to our intern why a client presentation had been delayed. Jennifer walked by and laughed, not with me, but at me. "You're so disorganized with deadlines, aren't you?" she said, loud enough for 3 other people to hear. I forced a smile, played it off like it was just friendly teasing between colleagues. But something cold settled in my chest. I'd never missed a deadline in my life, ever. I was the person who finished projects 2 days early, who sent reminder emails, who color-coded my calendar. The comment didn't match reality, but it was delivered with such casual confidence that I started second-guessing myself. The shift toward formalizing everything in writing came next, and I was stupid enough to think it was about being more professional. Before, we'd handle everything through quick messages or brief hallway conversations. Suddenly, Jennifer started requesting formal emails for every little thing. "Can you send me a breakdown of the Henderson project timeline? I'll need the client feedback documented before we move forward. Let's get the budget revisions in writing." I thought she was just being thorough, maybe trying to impress management with her attention to detail. I had no idea she was building a paper trail. creating documentation that would later be used to paint me as incompetent and unreliable. What really gets me now is how I ignored every red flag, because I wanted to believe in our professional relationship so badly. When she started asking for reports on projects that weren't technically her responsibility, I should have questioned it. When she began requesting copies of client communications that didn't involve her, I should have wondered why. Instead, I kept sharing, kept trusting, kept including her in everything because that's what I thought good colleagues did. I was so focused on being the kind of professional I'd want to work with that I completely missed the fact that she was studying my methods like a competitor, not supporting them like a partner. I remember one afternoon in late October, sitting in my car after work, replaying a conversation we'd had about the Rodriguez account. Jennifer had asked me to walk her through my entire approach to client relations, from initial contact to project completion. I'd spent almost an hour explaining my process, sharing techniques I'd developed over years of trial and error, opening up about strategies that had taken me ages to perfect. She listened intently, took notes, asked thoughtful follow-up questions. I drove home feeling good about mentoring a colleague, about contributing to our team's overall success. I had no clue I was basically giving her the blueprint to replace me. The hardest part about recognizing betrayal is that it rarely announces itself with dramatic gestures or obvious hostility. It creeps in through small changes, subtle shifts, tiny moments that your instincts pick up on, but your conscious mind dismisses. Jennifer's transformation wasn't a sudden personality change. It was a gradual reveal of who she'd always been underneath the friendly facade. And I was so invested in the version of her I'd trusted, so committed to believing in the professional relationship I thought we'd built, that I kept making excuses for behavior that should have been setting off alarm bells. The signs were all there, written in details I chose not to read. It was HR who called me into their office. Sandy from Human Resources, with her fake sympathetic smile and her clipboard full of corporate procedures. I walked in thinking maybe it was about the department restructuring rumors that had been floating around, or perhaps a discussion about my upcoming performance review. I left that sterile conference room with a label branded into my professional reputation: disorganized. And the worst part? The absolute gut-wrenching, soul-crushing worst part was that Jennifer had been the one whispering that poison into their ears all along. The moment I heard my name followed by concerns about methodology, felt like the floor disappearing beneath my feet. Sandy sat across from me at that cheap wooden table, the kind you'd find at a used office furniture store, and delivered the news with all the warmth of a parking ticket. "You've received some feedback about your work approach," she said, consulting her notes like she was reading a grocery list. "There are concerns about your organizational systems and project management consistency." I sat there, completely speechless, because every word was a lie. Every single accusation was the complete opposite of who I was as a professional. I was the person who color-coded spreadsheets, who set calendar reminders for everything, who never missed a deadline. The next day, seeing Jennifer in the hallway was like watching a stranger wear the face of someone I used to trust. I needed answers. I needed to understand how this had happened, how someone I'd shared my vulnerabilities with could turn around and destroy my reputation. But when I approached her by the water cooler, she couldn't even look at me. She literally turned her head away, like I was some kind of office pariah, like I was contagious. She mumbled something about being late for a meeting and practically jogged away from me. That's when I knew for certain she wasn't just a witness to whatever was happening to me. She was the architect of it. Then came the email that made everything crystal clear. Jennifer had written a detailed report to management about workflow inefficiencies in projects under my leadership. She documented every conversation we'd ever had about challenges with difficult clients, but twisted them to make it sound like I was overwhelmed and incompetent. She'd taken my honest admissions about tight deadlines and reframed them as evidence of poor planning. And here's the kicker. She signed it as Interim Project Coordinator, a title that didn't exist, an authority she'd never been given. But nobody questioned it. Nobody fact-checked her claims or asked for my side of the story. Reading that email felt like being punched in the stomach while someone read your diary out loud to a room full of strangers. Every private moment of frustration I'd shared with her, every moment of professional vulnerability, had been catalogued and weaponized against me. The Henderson project delays? She blamed my unclear communication. The Morrison client complaints? My inadequate preparation? The Patterson account revisions? Evidence of my scattered approach to project management. She'd taken months of normal business challenges, the kind every professional faces, and presented them as proof that I was failing at my job. What haunts me most is how she'd managed to position herself as the solution to problems she claimed I'd created. In her report, she outlined how she could provide stability and implement better systems to ensure these issues didn't happen again. She was basically applying for my job by burning down my reputation. And the most infuriating part was how she'd used my own transparency against me. Every time I'd included her in emails, every process I'd explained, every client relationship I'd trusted her with, it all became ammunition in her campaign to replace me. I spent that entire evening sitting in my apartment, reading and rereading that email, trying to find some mistake, some exaggeration I could dispute. But she'd been clever about it. She'd taken real situations, moments when I'd dealt with difficult clients or tight deadlines, and recontextualized them through a lens that made me look incompetent instead of hardworking. She'd turned my willingness to share challenges into evidence of inability to handle them. It was like watching someone take a photo of you helping someone up and cropping it to look like you were pushing them down. Technically accurate details, completely false narrative. Nobody defended me. Not Derek, who I'd covered for during his kid's surgery recovery. Not Maria, who I'd brought lunch to every Friday for 6 months when she was going through her divorce. Not even Tom from accounting, who I'd helped navigate his first client presentation when he was terrified of public speaking. The fear of getting involved, of potentially jeopardizing their own positions, was stronger than any loyalty they might have felt toward me. And that realization cut deeper than Jennifer's betrayal ever could. When I tried to present my side of the story in that cramped conference room with the buzzing overhead lights, the silence was deafening. 3 managers sat around that table: Sandy from HR, our department head Robert, and the regional supervisor whose name I can barely remember now, and not one of them asked a single follow-up question about my version of events. Robert wouldn't even look up from his laptop screen while I explained how Jennifer had misrepresented our project challenges. I laid out documentation, showed email threads that proved my organizational skills, presented client testimonials that contradicted every accusation she'd made. They listened with the enthusiasm of people waiting for a bus they knew wasn't coming. The phrase that shattered what was left of my professional confidence came from Robert himself. "Well, it's really a matter of perception, isn't it?" That single sentence dismissed months of hard work, years of building client relationships, countless late nights and early mornings dedicated to exceeding expectations. He didn't say I had failed, but he also didn't say I had succeeded. He threw my entire career into the gray area of interpretation and left Jennifer's narrative as the dominant story. It was like being told that your marriage was ending not because anyone did anything wrong, but because of different perspectives on fidelity. The day we all went to lunch at Romano's Deli after completing the Henderson campaign was when the isolation really hit me. It was supposed to be a celebration. We'd landed the biggest client of the quarter, delivered everything ahead of schedule, exceeded every metric they'd given us. The whole team piled into cars to head to the restaurant, and I realized that nobody had saved me a seat. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but the message was clear. I was radioactive now. I ended up sitting alone at the end of the table, picking at a sandwich that tasted like cardboard, watching my colleagues laugh and celebrate work that I'd played a major role in completing. What made it worse was how they all acted like nothing had changed. Derek still said, "Good morning," when he passed my desk. Maria still smiled when we crossed paths in the hallway. Tom still nodded politely when we ended up in the elevator together. But there was a distance now, A careful politeness that replaced the easy camaraderie we'd shared before. They treated me like someone recovering from a contagious illness, friendly enough from a safe distance. But nobody wanted to get too close. Nobody wanted to risk being associated with the person who was difficult to work with. I started eating lunch alone in my car, parked behind the building next to the dumpsters, because the break room had become a minefield of careful conversations and awkward silences. I'd sit there with a turkey sandwich from the gas station, watching other people through my windshield, people who got to be part of teams and groups and the normal professional relationships I'd taken for granted. The isolation wasn't just about being excluded from meetings or projects, it was about being erased from the social fabric of a workplace where I'd invested years of my life. The cruelest part was how everyone seemed to accept Jennifer's version of events without question. She'd painted herself as the concerned colleague who'd been trying to help an overwhelmed coworker, and they bought it completely. When she started getting invited to meetings I used to attend, when she began presenting ideas that sounded suspiciously like strategies we'd developed together, when she was suddenly the go-to person for projects that had been my specialty, nobody found any of it strange. It was like watching someone steal your identity in slow motion while everyone around you helped them perfect the impersonation. There was no meeting, no discussion, no chance to defend myself or present evidence or even ask questions about what was happening. Just a phone call at 4:30 on a Wednesday afternoon from Sandy in HR, asking me to come to her office for a quick administrative matter. I walked down that familiar hallway past the motivational posters and the bulletin board covered in employee birthday announcements, thinking maybe it was about updating my emergency contacts or signing some new policy document. I left that same hallway 20 minutes later, carrying a cardboard box with my coffee mug and desk plant, officially unemployed. Sandy couldn't even look at me when she delivered the news. She stared at a piece of paper on her desk like it contained the secrets of the universe, reading from what sounded like a script she'd memorized that morning. "We've decided to conclude your employment with Henderson Marketing effective immediately," she said in the same tone she might use to announce that the coffee machine was broken. No explanation beyond the corporate speak about different directions and mutual benefit. Like my 3 years of dedication and success were just an experiment that hadn't worked out. Something they could wrap up with a form letter and a final paycheck. The phrase that destroyed everything I built at that company was clinical and cold, based on consistent feedback regarding organizational methodology. That was it. That was how they summarized my termination. Not poor performance. My client retention rate was higher than anyone else in the department. Not missed deadlines. I'd never been late on a single project. Not personality conflicts or attendance issues or any of the usual reasons people get fired. Just organizational methodology, which was corporate language for we believe Jennifer's lies, and we don't want to deal with the drama anymore. The humiliation of being escorted to security to return my badge felt like a perp walk for a crime I didn't commit. The security guard, an older guy named Frank, who used to chat with me about his grandson's baseball games, wouldn't meet my eyes as he processed my ID card and parking pass. He mumbled something about just doing his job and handed me a receipt like I was returning defective merchandise at Target. I'd walked through those glass doors every morning for 3 years, and now I was being walked out like I was some kind of security risk who might steal office supplies or sabotage the copier. They didn't even let me say goodbye to anyone. No farewell email to clients I'd worked with for years. No chance to transfer projects properly or brief anyone on ongoing campaigns. They just cut me off from everything instantly, like deleting a file from a computer. I thought about the Rodriguez account that was supposed to launch next month, about the Morrison campaign that needed final approval, about all the relationships and projects and responsibilities that would now fall to other people, probably to Jennifer, without any context or background or institutional knowledge. My personal belongings fit into one small cardboard box that the receptionist handed me with an apologetic smile. 3 years of professional life reduced to a coffee mug with a chip in the handle. A small succulent that was probably going to die without proper care. A framed photo of my college graduation. and a stapler I'd bought myself because the company ones were always broken. That was it. That was the physical evidence of my time at Henderson Marketing. My contributions to projects worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. My relationships with clients who trusted me with their business. Walking to my car in the parking lot where I'd spent 3 years arriving early and leaving late felt like the longest walk of my life. I kept waiting for someone to run after me, to tell me this was all a mistake, that they'd figured out what Jennifer had done and wanted to apologize. But nobody came. The building just got smaller in my rearview mirror as I drove away for the last time, carrying my cardboard box and the crushing realization that loyalty and hard work meant absolutely nothing when someone decided to destroy your reputation from the inside. The betrayal was complete, and I was completely alone with the wreckage of everything I'd built. I lost more than a job that day. I lost my confidence, my sense of purpose, my belief that hard work and integrity mattered in the professional world. For months afterward, I carried around this weight that I couldn't describe to anyone. Not my family, not my friends, not even my therapist. It wasn't just unemployment. It was the complete destruction of my professional identity. The realization that someone I'd trusted had methodically dismantled everything I'd worked for. And the worst part was how I started questioning everything about myself, wondering if maybe I really was as incompetent as Jennifer had made me seem. I became obsessed with going through old emails, looking for evidence that would prove I hadn't failed. I'd sit at my kitchen table for hours, scrolling through months of correspondence, reading client compliments and project approvals and deadline confirmations. I forwarded successful campaign results to myself, saved screenshots of positive feedback, created folders full of documentation that proved I'd been good at my job. It was like being a detective investigating my own professional murder, desperately searching for clues that would prove the crime had even happened. But there was no audience for this evidence, no court where I could present my case. The message I kept waiting for never came. Some small, naive part of me believed that Jennifer would eventually reach out with an explanation, maybe even an apology. That she'd send a text saying it had all gotten out of hand. That she'd never meant for me to lose my job. That she was sorry for how everything had played out. I checked my phone obsessively for weeks, hoping to see her name pop up with some acknowledgement of what she'd done. But there was nothing. Complete radio silence. Like I'd never existed in her professional world at all. What made the aftermath even more devastating was how I internalized the blame. When you're betrayed by someone you trusted, especially in a professional setting, you start questioning your own judgment about everything. Maybe I had been disorganized. Maybe I was terrible at my job and everyone was just too polite to tell me. Maybe Jennifer had been right to document my failures and alert management to problems I couldn't see. The gaslighting was so complete that I began to doubt my own memories of success, my own perception of my professional capabilities. The isolation during those first few months was suffocating. I'd wake up each morning without anywhere to go, without the routine that had structured my life for 3 years. My apartment felt like a prison cell where I replayed every conversation with Jennifer, every meeting where I'd shared information that she later used against me. Every moment when I should have seen the signs, but chose to trust instead. I'd sit on my couch in pajamas at 2 in the afternoon, watching daytime television and feeling like a failure in every possible way. Sleep became impossible because my brain wouldn't shut off. I'd lie awake running through scenarios where I'd handled things differently, where I'd been more suspicious, where I'd protected myself instead of being so transparently trusting. I replayed that final HR meeting dozens of times, thinking of all the things I should have said, all the evidence I should have presented, all the ways I could have fought back against the accusations. But hindsight is a cruel companion when you're trying to make sense of betrayal. The depression that followed wasn't just about losing my job. It was about losing my faith in professional relationships, in the idea that loyalty and competence would be recognized and rewarded. Jennifer hadn't just taken my position. She'd stolen my belief that the workplace could be a place where honest people could build meaningful careers. I felt like I'd been playing by one set of rules while everyone else was playing a completely different game, one where manipulation and backstabbing were not only acceptable but rewarded. The professional world suddenly felt like a jungle where trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. Today, almost 2 years later, I understand what really happened. It wasn't my lack of organization that destroyed my career at Henderson Marketing. It was Jennifer's lack of ethics, combined with a workplace culture that preferred convenient lies over uncomfortable truths, and the silence of colleagues who chose their own security over basic human decency. If I could go back in time, I would have trusted my instincts instead of rationalizing away every red flag she threw at me. I would have protected myself instead of being so vulnerably transparent with someone who was studying my weaknesses like a predator. I should have recognized the trap when she started requesting everything in writing. That wasn't about being more professional or organized. That was about creating a paper trail she could manipulate later. Every email I sent explaining my processes, every document I shared breaking down my client relationships, every vulnerable moment I put in writing became ammunition in her campaign to replace me. She wasn't learning from me. She was building a case against me. And I helped her do it because I confused transparency with trust, openness with partnership. The biggest lesson I learned is to never confuse politeness with loyalty again. Jennifer was always pleasant, always smiling, always eager to help and learn and be involved. But politeness is just social lubrication. It doesn't mean anything about someone's character or intentions. Real loyalty shows up in actions, in moments when supporting you might cost someone something. It reveals itself when there's no audience, no benefit to being on your side. Jennifer's friendliness was a performance designed to keep me sharing information and lowering my guard. Looking back, I can see exactly when I should have started protecting myself. The forgotten meeting invitation should have been my wake-up call. The public comment about my organization skills should have triggered my defenses. The sudden insistence on formal documentation should have made me suspicious. But I was so invested in believing in our professional relationship that I kept making excuses for behavior that was clearly strategic and manipulative. Trust, I've learned, should be earned gradually, not given freely just because someone is friendly and interested. What I wish I could tell my younger self, and what I want every professional woman to understand, is this: document everything, but don't share everything. Keep records of your successes, your client feedback, your project timelines, your contributions to team efforts. But don't hand over your methods, your client relationships, your professional vulnerabilities to anyone who hasn't proven their loyalty over time. Transparency is valuable, but it should be mutual and earned, not one-sided and naive. The hardest truth I had to accept is that some people see kindness as weakness and trust as opportunity. Jennifer didn't betray me despite our professional relationship. She cultivated our professional relationship specifically so she could betray me more effectively. She studied my methods so she could replicate them, learned my client relationships so she could inherit them, and documented my challenges so she could use them against me. I wasn't her colleague. I was her target. And my willingness to be open and collaborative made me an easy mark. If you're reading this and recognizing patterns in your own workplace, please don't ignore your instincts the way I did. When someone starts asking too many detailed questions about your processes, when they begin requesting documentation for things that don't require it, when they position themselves as your helper while subtly undermining your reputation, pay attention. Trust your gut when relationships feel transactional rather than mutual. Protect your professional secrets the same way you'd protect your personal ones. And remember that true partners don't need to study you to support you. They support you because that's what partners do. The workplace can be cruel enough without handing your enemies the weapons to destroy you. If this story resonated with you, if you've experienced workplace betrayal, or you're seeing warning signs in your current situation, I want to hear from you. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell because I'll be sharing more stories about navigating workplace politics, recognizing manipulation, and building the kind of professional relationships that actually deserve your trust. You don't have to learn these lessons the hard way. Let my experience be your education, and let's make sure that people like Jennifer don't get away with destroying good people's careers ever again.